In the 1870s, if you were a British aristocrat, you had at least three things: a long family name, a wind-swept stone castle, and a mountain of debt. The feudal system of England, once the foundation of supreme power, was crumbling. Land revenues were no longer enough to sustain a lavish lifestyle. The Industrial Revolution had not only transformed the economy but also redefined social status. Power was now held not only by gentlemen born into wealth, but also by self-made men across the ocean. A new class, the American financial elite, was rising like a tidal wave. With millions of dollars but nothing to mark themselves in the social handbooks of Europe. Imagine you were a young lady growing up in a 7-story mansion on Fifth Avenue. You were taught ballet, played the harpsichord, and spoke French as your native tongue. But even though your father owned the largest railroad in America, you were still a merchant's daughter in the eyes of European aristocrats. In England, where a letter of introduction from the Queen was worth more than a fortune, American girls, no matter how rich, were still considered upstarts. And if they wanted to enter the luxurious rooms of Buckingham Palace, they needed an invitation, specifically a marriage to an English aristocrat. Their parents knew this very well. Some wealthy parents, especially mothers who had been marginalized in European high society, bet everything on their daughters, equipping them with education, beauty, social skills, and a dowry large enough to make any duke stop and look. To meet the growing demand, a whole transatlantic wedding industry was formed. Aristocrat magazines such as the titled American published advertisements from single dukes with attractive descriptions such as, a 32-year-old captain of the Coldstream Brigade, seeking a lady of altruistic spirit and a fortune of $1 million or more. Marriage agencies operated quietly but effectively, making matches between families in New York, Boston and the ancient houses of York and Sussex. Parisian soirees became a place for market research, where white-gloved gentlemen watched American ladies waltz. The phrase, "dollar princess," began to appear in the press as a pun that was both satirical and glorifying. It implied a girl with no title, no noble lineage, but could buy the throne of marriage with US dollars. Many of these girls became icons of the era. Jenny Jerome, who brought a huge dowry and gave birth to Winston Churchill. Consuelo Vanderbilt married a duke but cried on her wedding day because she was forced to marry. Mary Leiter, from Chicago, became Viceroy of India, the highest-ranking American woman ever in the British Empire. If you look back at history, these marriages are not exactly new. For centuries, European aristocrats still viewed marriage as a diplomatic tool, a way to form alliances between families. But the dollar princesses are different. This is no longer an alliance between two kingdoms, but between two classes that are changing positions. The British aristocracy, once dominant in the world, is now forced to sell off its prestige to survive. The American bourgeoisie, once despised, now has the right to choose a groom who is an earl, a duke, even a royal descendant. Behind the glamorous wedding photos and champagne parties in the castle, there are girls trapped in a political and economic game that they did not choose. They carry within themselves a contradiction, admired by the whole world, but not having the right to choose their own love. They are taught to bring honor to the family, but no one teaches them how to face loneliness in a foreign land. Some choose to accept, some rebel and divorce, which was considered shameful at that time. And some, like Frances Work, Princess Diana's great-grandmother, choose to remain silent, so that later generations will remember her as a part of history, not as a person with feelings. Of the hundreds of lavish weddings between American ladies and British aristocrats, perhaps one of the most famous and heartbreaking was that of Consuelo Vanderbilt. She was born into a family whose father was a railroad millionaire, William Vanderbilt, one of the richest men in America at the time. But that wealth did not allow Consuelo to live her life as she wished. On the contrary, it became a golden shackle, tying her life to a man she did not love, Charles Spencer Churchill, 9th Duke of Marlborough. Her wedding day, November 6, 1895, became an international event, with New Yorkers pouring onto Fifth Avenue to catch a glimpse of the million-dollar bride. But underneath that gorgeous white lace wedding dress, Consuelo was crying, not out of emotion, out of despair. She had loved someone else, Winthrop Rutherford, an American man to whom she had secretly been engaged. But her mother, Alva Vanderbilt, locked her up, threatening that if she did not marry the English Duke, she would die of a heart attack. It was a cruel, but effective, psychological attack, because Consuelo, like many girls of that time, was taught to sacrifice for the honor of her family. On the morning of the wedding, she refused to let anyone enter her room. She dressed alone, tears falling on her French lace dress. And then she walked downstairs like a lifeless corpse, walking into the wedding hall like a pawn. Not only Consuelo, many other dollar princesses also fell into similar situations. Among them, Frances Work, great-grandmother of Princess Diana, was married to an English baron, only to have him gamble away all her dowry. Winneretta Singer, daughter of the Singer sewing machine magnate, was married to a French prince despite her complete lack of interest in men. After the wedding night, she climbed on the wardrobe and shouted, "Come near me. I will kill you." You may think this story is funny, but the reality is, they were married off like property. Not allowed to choose who they loved. Not even allowed to say no. In the upper-class society at that time, opposing a well-matched marriage was no different than humiliating the whole family. Young girls were forced to live with strangers in foreign lands, enduring coldness, indifference, even mental abuse, all in exchange for the two words, princess. For many people in modern society, love is a personal choice. But in the late 19th century, among the upper class, love was something to discuss after the marriage contract was signed. Consuelo Vanderbilt's life at Blenheim Palace, considered one of the greatest castles in England, was not romantic. For the first 3 months, their bedroom was not yet decorated, so Consuelo had to stay in a cold room facing north. No flowers, no sunlight, no love, just quiet meals with her husband, and masked appearances in society. In a letter, Consuelo wrote, "I walked like a machine. Every day was a performance. I no longer recognized myself." The marriage eventually ended after more than 10 years, with adultery on both sides and a public divorce. But it took another decade for them to be officially annulled in the eyes of the church in 1926. It is worth noting that in the marriage negotiations, the bride herself had no say. The parents chose the husband. The family decided on the dowry. The press reported on the golden marriage, but the girl's feelings were left out. Perhaps the most common tragedy of the era. Women were taught how to be wives, but not how to protect themselves. Consuelo, Winneretta, Mary Leiter, Frances Work, each had their own story. But they all started from the same place. They were not allowed to say, "I don't want to." Imagine. You are a duke, in debt. Your castle is falling apart. Your servants are demanding your wages. You know that if you marry an American lady, any lady, you can change your life. Would you choose love, or a dowry? For many English aristocrats at that time, the choice was clear. And for American ladies, the heartbreaking thing was, they knew very well that they were chosen only for money. Many brides had to sign a marriage contract like a business contract. How much dowry? How much to pay for the castle's renovation? How much to invest? Whether to inherit? Marriage became a transaction. The bride became an investment guarantee. From a material point of view, it can be said that many dollar princesses helped keep English castles from falling into the hands of banks. Blenheim Palace, thanks to Consuelo Vanderbilt's money, is now a World Heritage Site. Highclere Castle, the filming location of Downton Abbey, was preserved thanks to Almina Womwell's dowry. Cliveden House, Lady Astor's residence, retains its historical position to this day. But for them personally, the price was freedom, youth, and even soul. Consuelo, after her divorce, became a philanthropist, fighting for women's rights. Winneretta Singer, after 2 marriages, devoted the rest of her life to supporting the arts and living out her true gender. Admittedly, in the 19th century, women's options were extremely limited. Marriage was almost the only way for a woman to enter the power class. But once the title was achieved, many dollar princesses did not stop at the role of noble ladies. On the contrary, they used fame as a ladder to climb the sky of freedom. Some chose the arts, some entered politics, some became patrons, social activists, and even history writers. Among the most special dollar princesses, Winneretta Singer was perhaps a rare case. Born as the heiress to a huge fortune from the Singer Sewing Machine Corporation. She was not the fragile type of young lady. From the beginning, she was different. She was intelligent, strong, decisive, and loved women. Despite being forced to marry 2 French princes, the first of which was never consummated because she openly refused to consummate the wedding, Winnaretta remained true to herself. Her second marriage, to Prince Edmond de Polignac, a fellow homosexual aristocrat, turned out to be a lasting relationship, one based on consent, respect and freedom. Together, they created one of the most prestigious music art salons in Paris, which brought together great musicians, painters and writers such as Ravel, Debussy, Cocteau, and Proust. Through her generous sponsorship, Winnaretta not only rescued many talented artists, but also created a space for those who were unacceptable in normal society. If you think the dollar princesses were just fashion icons or aristocratic ballroom figures, you haven't met Nancy Astor. Born in Virginia, Nancy Langhorne was the daughter of a successful tobacco merchant. After her first marriage failed, she moved to England and remarried William Waldorf Astor, one of the richest men in the world at the time. When William was appointed to the House of Lords, Nancy inherited the seat in a special election in 1919, becoming the first woman to sit in the British Parliament as a full member of Parliament. From being a foreign dollar princess, Nancy entered politics, directly confronting the conservative British gentleman, something no woman had done before. She became a strong voice for women, for educational rights, and a symbol of the transformation from ornament to game changer. Back to Consuelo Vanderbilt, who cried at her wedding and lived as a shadow for 10 years in Blenheim Castle. After her divorce, she did not retreat from public life as many expected. Instead, she remarried a man she truly loved, Jacques Balsan, a French airline pilot. They lived in Paris and then the south of France, where Consuelo finally came to terms with herself. No longer a family honor duchess, Consuelo became a philanthropist, socialite, and author of the best-selling memoir The Glitter and the Gold, a full account of her arranged marriage. The book not only had a huge impact, but also gave thousands of young women the courage to speak out about the pain of being controlled and coerced. In a society that rarely listened to them, not all dollar princesses were victims. Some turned their circumstances into soft power. Like Mary Leiter, wife of Lord Curzon, Viceroy of India. While the marriage was also strategic, with the Leiter family fortune playing a large role in Curzon's elevation to the position of viceroy, Mary was far from passive. She organized diplomatic events, maintained the image of British power in India, and became a cultural and fashion icon. The peacock dress, woven with gold thread and real peacock feathers, that she wore to the coronation of King Edward VII is still considered one of the most iconic designs of the Victorian era. Mary was not only a symbol of luxury, but also part of the British Empire's soft politics strategy, despite her new American background. Looking back, it is clear that the dollar princesses were not simply victims. They were mirrors of a harsh era, where women had few options, but managed to overcome, shape, and even rebuild the system that had held them back. Some accepted their fate but found ways to contribute from within. Some openly rebelled and reclaimed their voice. But they all had one thing in common: they didn't let money or titles define their entire lives. These are women who turned an arranged marriage into the beginning of their journey to freedom. By the turn of the 20th century, after hundreds of famous dollar princess marriages, people began to wake up. British castles were renovated with American money. Many aristocratic families survived the financial crisis thanks to their wives' dowries. But what cannot be bought is happiness. The divorce rate of dollar princesses was sky high. Many had to live in isolation, despised by their husbands, or suffocated by the suffocatingly strict aristocratic rules. The title of Duchess, Marchioness, or Baroness eventually became just a gold plaque attached to a dusty door, unable to open the door to the heart. One of the first signs that the dollar princess wave was on the decline came from American billionaire fathers. Frank Work, the father of Frances Work, a famous dollar princess, angrily stated in an interview, "As fast as American men make money, their daughters throw it across the Atlantic." For Mr. Work, these marriages were not strategic wisdom but heartbreaking waste. He once declared bluntly, "If it were up to me, I would make international marriage a hanging crime." Behind the anger was a sense of betrayal by a class of men who had built America with sweat and effort, only to see their daughters marry pocketless aristocrats. The reality was that many dollar princesses were not living in the luxury they were thought to be. Many aristocratic castles were in serious disrepair. Servants were cut, kitchens had no heating, and the sanitary system was still medieval. Girls who were used to living in New York mansions with electric lights and elevators suddenly had to douse themselves in cold water, eat on time, and follow strict rules of etiquette. Some aristocrats did not even hide their intention to take the money and then keep their distance. After the wedding, they went hunting, went out, and did not bother to take their wives to social events. American wives, no matter how talented or kind, were still considered unapproved foreign imports. In many cases, dollar princess was no different from a provider of investment capital, not a life partner. After World War I, the social structure of Europe changed completely. The aristocracy was no longer the center of power. They lost their land, their servants, their influence. Their property was heavily taxed. Hundreds of castles were abandoned. On the other hand, America was experiencing an industrial boom, economic growth, and the formation of a strong middle class. The question is, why marry daughters to men who have passed their prime, when right here in America, they can marry inventors, businessmen, politicians, or doctors, who have both money and a future? When the dream of nobility was no longer attractive, transatlantic marriages also died out. In the past, the press hailed dollar princess marriages as fairy tales. The American lady and the poor duke sounded like a romantic symphony. But as time went on, the press began to expose the tragedy behind the wedding dress. Stories of divorce, isolation, psychological abuse, and cold living in castles began to come to light. The truth was no longer hidden behind stone walls. And the American public also began to react negatively. As society changed, women's rights rose. People no longer accepted the idea of marrying off their daughters as commodities. A new generation began to ask their parents, "Why marry off your daughter to a name that has been left in the history books?" From 1920 onwards, the number of dollar princesses declined sharply. American elite families changed their strategies, investing in their daughters' college education, starting their own companies, or marrying domestically. And conversely, British aristocrats were no longer attractive marriage items. They were now just ghosts of a bygone era. People began to look back at the dollar princess era as a romantic but outdated time, where women were weighed down between money and fame. Ironically, while in the past everyone wanted their daughter to be a duchess, today, even real-life princesses like Princess Diana, Meghan Markle, have proven that being a royal bride is not always a dream. Marriage, after all, should not be a financial contract. Love should not be a reward for obedience. And women, no matter what century, deserve to choose their own lives. The dollar princesses may have lived in an era where everything was predetermined, but they left behind an unforgettable lesson for posterity. What do you think of the dollar princesses? Are we still repeating the model of marriage of convenience in modern times under a new guise? Share your views in the comments. And if you find this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss out on unique but humane historical stories. Only available on our channel. See you in the next video.